Hello, everyone, all the participants. Welcome to the final session of the first day of our European Learning and Teaching Forum in 2021. We are online, as you have noticed, and ready to go. What those of you who have been following us this afternoon have noticed already is that we are really looking at the sustainability from different perspectives. We've had two different perspectives now, and now we're going to move to a third one where we're trying to connect the dots. Higher education is expected to provide the learners with a wide set of
now I should switch off
skills,
my microphone,
knowledge,
right?
and skills.
Okay.
The academic knowledge as well as entrepreneurial skills and so on. So our speakers are going to cover all this in the next hour. My name is Tia Loukkola. I'm acting as your master of ceremony in this event. So a couple of practicalities before we move on to the topic. First of all, there is a chat box that many of you have already found. In that one, you can indicate, introduce yourself, you can make greetings, you can talk to the participants in a written format, and you can also raise some technical issues if you have any. We have a team of colleagues in the background who are going to deal with some answering your questions to us. Then we also have a Q&A section where I would kindly ask you to focus your questions to the speakers. So the chair of the session will be taking up the questions, and importantly enough, even if you don't feel like you want to pose a question, you can vote for the questions in there. So put the thumbs up if you think of some questions are really pertinent. That way the chair will be able to pick them up from the chat more easily, or in the Q&A section more easily. We are going to also poke your brains a little bit in this session by posing you some questions in the format of polls. So your opinion will be appreciated. And then finally, there is a handout section where you will find some relevant documents and links that our speakers have provided, as well as the program booklet, which includes interesting links to our YouTube channel. Talking about our YouTube channel, this session is being recorded, and we will be posting the recording to our EUA YouTube channel. So go to YouTube and seek for European University Association, and you will find it there after the forum. Also, after the forum, all those who have registered to the forum will receive an email from us, which has all the recordings to all the sessions that have been recorded. So I think those are the most important practicalities to be said at this stage. And then I'll leave the floor to the session chair, the member of the EUA's Learning and Teaching Steering Committee, Ruben Janssens, who is also the representative of the European Student Union in our steering committee. So Ruben, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, and a welcome, and thank you all of you here present today. It's going to be a very interesting session. We're going to talk about approaches to creating a more holistic model of providing education, such as linking learning and teaching with research, as well as with professional and entrepreneurial skills development. We're going to have two presentations today. First of all, we're going to hear from Professor Edward J. Coyle from the Georgia Institute of Technology in the US. And besides systemic reform of higher education, he's a professor in the field of electrical engineering and computer science. And he's going to present together with Professor Stephen Marshall from the University of Strathclyde in the UK. He's a professor of electrical and electronics engineering. Professor Coyle, he founded a vertically integrated projects program, and that program integrates research and education by embedding large-scale long-term teams of undergraduates in the research efforts of faculty and their graduate students. And he's a chair of the VRP Consortium, which is the alliance of all universities that have VRP programs. And Stephen Marshall, he established a vertically integrated project program at Strathclyde, almost 10 years ago, and he's worked closely with Dr. Scott Strachan to align the VIP program with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And they're going to talk together about how those VIP programs have been implemented in different universities in Europe and how they've overcome challenges in implementing those programs. Now, second presentation will be from Dr. Sibi Richard. She's an expert in higher education policy development and in institutional reforms. She's worked at ETH Zurich to coordinate strategic planning. She's been Chancellor of the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg, and now she's active as an international consultant with a focus on combining institutional change management with global higher education developments. She's going to talk to us about how universities adapt their learning and teaching methodologies and their curricula to ensure that learners develop competences that allow them to handle the accelerated change and disruptive transformations. And she's going to show us how those new approaches to higher education are linked with institutional transformation agendas. So, very interesting session ahead of us, and let's go straight to our first two presenters, Dr. Edward Coyle and Dr. Stephen Marshall.
Thank you, Ruben. Let's see, I'm waiting to see the slides. There we go. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ed Coyle, and I'm the director of the VIP program at Georgia Tech. And the presentation today will be a tag team between me and Steve Marshall, who's the director of VIP at the University of Strathclyde. And he's also the contact for the VIP consortium for universities in Europe. Our co-authors are Brigitte Delecka, Maria Engberg, and Ian Smith, who are the directors of VIP programs at Riga Technical University, Namur University, and the University of St. Andrews. And our goal today is to talk about a way to link link research, education, and the development of professional skills. And the tool that we use to do that is called the Vertically Integrated Projects Program. And the goal of the program to unite those three things, research, education, development of skills, we do that by uniting scholarship and exploration in the university environment. And that's a little different than the term you're used to hearing, which is probably education and research. And it's important to understand how we use those terms. By scholarship, we mean the development of deep knowledge and expertise in one or more fields. And the exploration, we mean acts of discovery, design, creativity, innovation, etc., in one or more fields. And we use exploration to break down disciplinary barriers that would otherwise keep people from working together. So keep that in mind. We'll often say research and education, but we really mean scholarship and exploration. And both of these exist in every field. Okay, so in trying to unite all of those, we found that there are three barriers to uniting scholarship and exploration. First was the fragmentation by time, which primarily affects the undergraduates. Their experiences tend to be atomized into semesters and academic years with no single unifying thread that runs through their experience as undergrads. On the academic staff side, it's a fragmentation by mission, where your activities tend to be partitioned into research, education, and service, or in our terminology, exploration, scholarship, and outreach. And then finally, almost every institution is fragmented by discipline, both by budget lines and even by cultures, and they tend to create and reinforce disciplinary silos. And VIP has managed to overcome all of those. And the way it does that is it enables continuity of time for the undergrads by enabling them to join large-scale projects that they can be a part of for up to 6 semesters in a row. And they earn credit, and they are graded, and those credits count towards the students' degrees. It allows the academic staff to integrate their missions by including the undergraduates in an effective way on teams that help them with their research. And finally, once we overcame these first two barriers of time and mission, the disciplinary barriers just basically fell away. And we'll show you how that works in a little bit. So the basic architecture of the program. So the goal is to enable long-term, large-scale, multidisciplinary teams of undergraduates that are embedded in the research activities of faculty and the graduate students and postdocs. The project teams are started at the request of academic staff. The teams that are organized to work with them are large. They may start out with 8 to 10 students, but they grow to whatever size works best for the team. Average size tends to be 10 to 20 students, 1 to 4 grad students, and 1 to 2 faculty, academic staff advisors. On each VIP team, there are second through final year undergraduates, and they can stay on team till they graduate. New students replace those who do graduate, and the returning students each semester onboard the new students, thus getting some peer mentoring and peer leadership experience. Long-term participation, up to 3 years per student, so they can learn about a project, contribute to it, and eventually lead it, which contributes significantly to their development of professional skills. So the teams are structured so that they can last for many years, even decades, as you'll see soon. Students are drawn from all disciplines needed by the project, and the students earn academic credit and grades each semester. And just to emphasize the size of these teams, this is a photo of my team, which is now 20 years old. And this was from a particular semester. These are the students who were on it at that time. So it was a mix of students from 4 disciplines, all 3 years, and then my PhD students on the right. And just to give you an idea of the scale that's possible and the sustainability of the program, we currently have 81 teams at Georgia Tech with 1,300 students enrolled. We have students and academic staff from all colleges at Georgia Tech who are participating, who have teams and are members of teams. And in the handouts, there is a list of URLs where you can go and take a look at the list of teams at the different VIP sites. And this is my favorite slide. Each vertical bar in this slide represents a VIP team at Georgia Tech. The height of the bar indicates the number of students on that team, and the colors in each bar indicate the disciplines of the students who make up that team. So our biggest team has about 70 students, average size is about 16, and new teams start out small and grow to whatever size works best. But it's noteworthy that every single team is multidisciplinary. So the students get in-depth experience in their field and learn how to work with people from other disciplines. This is where all of our advisors come from. So these are the different colleges: engineering, sciences, liberal arts, design, computing here at Georgia Tech. Then there are other organizations, Georgia Tech Research Institute, which those are PhD researchers, but they're not regular faculty. But they often have their own VIP teams. So you can see that we're already campus-wide. And assessing the performance of students is where we often get the most questions, and we've refined this quite a bit over the years. They're graded in 3 components. Their documentation. We tell them if they didn't document what they did, then they didn't do it, which is essential for maintaining accurate grading of students. So they maintain personal journals, update things in Wiki, which is where common knowledge resides for the whole team, GitHub for software, and so forth. And the individual contributions of the students are judged by the team's advisors and graduate students. And teamwork comes from advisors' observations plus peer evaluations. But every student is earning credit and every student is graded. No pass-fail, no auditing, no volunteers. And the primary benefits for students: long-term experience focused on a real project, which is what students you'll find really want to get involved in addition to just sitting in classes. Opportunity to learn and master different roles and skills. They get an in-depth experience in their field combined with a long-term multidisciplinary experience. For academic staff, much better organized, much more effective undergraduate research. The team actually contributes to your work. And you get continuity of knowledge and experience on the team. It's also a great recruiting ground for your own graduate students. And finally, for the peer-to-peer mentoring that's done by the students and the peer leadership provided by the students actually takes a lot of that burden off the faculty and the grad students. VIP program characteristics. This is the overall program. It should be led by academic staff. The projects are embedded in the research activities of academic staff. That way they benefit and they will stick with it for the long term. So you have large-scale projects that can last years and decades. Multidisciplinary teams are clearly possible and encouraged. The program must be curricular, and all students must be graded. There should be incentives built into how credits count towards degrees so that students participate for 2+ years. And finally, the outcomes are explicitly both disciplinary and professional skills for the undergraduates. This program has proven effective. It's been adopted by 41 universities so far, a list of international universities here and those in the United States. And as you'll see, we're on every continent now except Antarctica. And we're always welcoming new universities to the consortium. And we meet once a year to share experiences, share problems, solve problems together. We write papers together, we write proposals together. And in the center of this photo, up near the top, you'll see Steve Marshall, and I'll hand the baton off to him, and he'll talk about the VIP program at Strathclyde. So, Steve?
Okay, thanks, Ed. So let me move on to the next slide. So you've heard from Ed that he's developed over quite a long period of time this fantastic mechanism for engaging students in long-term projects, giving them an excellent education, but actually delivering real outcomes. And VIP is a tool, it's a mechanism that you can use for engaging students to do whatever is important to you. And what we've done at Strathclyde is about 9-10 years ago, Ed came and gave us a talk on VIP, and we decided, yes, we want to have VIP. So we implemented a program from scratch. And then since about 2016, we've aimed the VIP program at addressing the UN Sustainable Development Goals, like those shown in front of you. And we've called our program VIP for Sustainable Development. I'm going to open the poll because there's a question about this, which you can be having a think about. So what are our projects? Our projects are all aimed at addressing at least one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So let me give you some examples. One of them is our colleagues in civil and environmental engineering that work in water supply. And the students there work with universities and communities in rural Malawi in providing clean drinking water. Prior to their engagement with this, members of the family had to walk miles and miles to wells which may well have been dry or salinated or contaminated in some way. So they're working, the students work in the semester time, and then a group of them will actually go to Malawi in the summer and implement some of these plans. Another example, our longest running VIP, which is led by my co-lead, Dr. Scott Strachan, deals with energy for development. Large areas of the world, and particularly in rural Africa, like the Gambia, there are villages with no electricity. It gets dark about 6 o'clock at night, so it's quite hard to study in the evening. Children born in the hospitals are born in darkness or by smoky lights, using burning kerosene lamps. And so Scott and his team, they've designed solar power systems, and they produce, in the term time, the students model the different systems and put them together into networks. And then some of them actually go to Gambia and climb on the roof and install these systems. So these are the solar panels. And you can see here, the students can now study in the evening. In the hospitals, the maternity ward is lit, so there are no longer children born during the night. And this has actually led to an improvement in the mortality rate. So thanks to the efforts of some of our students, there are people alive now who wouldn't otherwise be alive. I mean, what a fantastic thing to have achieved from your undergraduate experience. And there are lots of other projects. I don't have time to cover them all now, but just to give you an example, there are 19 projects with about 200 students, and we put these right across the university. So previously, a lot of this developed in engineering, and what we've done at Strathclyde, we've extended this into the humanities, the social sciences, wet sciences. So there are projects closer to home, working with STEM education in low attainment schools, also in the humanities and gender equality, widening access, and also prosthetics and in politics, lots and lots of different projects. And we're also fortunate enough to be awarded the International Green Gown Award for Student Engagement. We also were given an award for a joint publication with ED by the Association for Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. We've put lots of material in the handouts, so there should be links to the university's website with the different projects and some research papers that we've had published. And within the consortium, there's a nice support mechanism to allow other universities to start their own programs and get the support of the other teams. And there are quite a few now building up in Europe. So the University of Malmö in Sweden, they have 5 teams, 50 students based in technology and culture. They have a slightly different system where you apply to the program and then are allocated to a team. The Riga Technical University in Latvia, a lot of their work is around makerspace, prototyping, labs. They have 7 teams and 140 students, so you can see quite big teams. And closer to home, or my home, the University of St Andrews has the first program which is mainly based in the humanities, and they've started this year, and I'm an examiner there, and I've helped them get that program started. And there are other universities. The University of Bath in England is also starting its own program. So you've heard about VIP, you've heard about this mechanism to deliver things and great education. There are different ways you can use it. We choose to use it for addressing the SDGs. So I wanted to challenge you with something which you can respond to in the poll if you wish. What could you achieve if you had a VIP team? So I'm going to stop there and hand back to Ruben.
Well, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. We've got the results of the poll in now, so if you want, we can take a look at this. And in the meantime, I'll encourage everybody to send in their questions in the Q&A tab. So I know, Stephen, if you can see the results of the poll.
Yes, it looks. Yeah, it looks like the winner, if we can call it a winner, quality education is coming. We didn't have all the options, so we had to compress some of them, but quality education is coming in at 30%. That's the highest, and the next is industry, innovation, infrastructure, sustainable cities, 14. And hunger, good health and well-being at 13.
All right, very interesting. I've seen that we've got some questions coming in as well. First of all, Gabriel Aberman asks us to elaborate a bit more about the peer assessment for the grading, because that's usually a quite sensitive area. And she'd like to know to what extent the process itself is the basis for grading in comparison to the result or the product of the project.
I can take the first stab at answering that question. We actually have a peer evaluation tool where the students do evaluate their other members of the team, primarily the ones they work most closely with, because these are big teams. On a team of 70, you don't evaluate everybody else. And we look at primarily the things that the students contribute to the project. Are they providing leadership? Are they available? Are they interacting? Who do you exchange information with, and who do you get information from? Things like that. Now, the only people who see the results of those peer evaluations are the academic staff. And they are used to diagnose the health of the team and to give feedback to the students on how they could improve their performance on the team and improve the performance of the overall team. So it's meant to enable effective mentorship of students. It's not meant to punish them in any way. And but it's approximately 1/3 of their grade. 1/3 is for their documentation. 1/3 for the a judgment from the academic staff about how much the student is contributing based on what should be expected of them as a new student or a veteran student or a student leader on the team.
All right, thank you. I've got a second question as well. Laura Crane wants to know whether these projects are mutual partnerships with communities, or are they strictly like charity or aid? And are the students in the African locations also able to learn how to install and maintain the technology and to participate in the courses for free?
Yes, wow, that's... so I'll take those in reverse order and maybe you can remind me. Yes, my colleague Scott works with local universities in order that the systems can be maintained and leave spares there, because you don't want the community to become dependent on them and then it to be taken away. So we try and work as closely as possible with the local community. What were the other points? Can you remind me?
Well, the question has disappeared from me as well, but I think another one was about the people in the African communities, for example, if they can participate for free as well, and in one way they are trained to work with the software, for example.
Yes, we try and work as closely as we can with the local communities, and yeah, to leave some spares and to train them in maintenance in order that it can be they can work on it themselves if possible. So yeah, that's. But there's some other points.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that because the teams are long term, the students that have been working on the project, who initiated the project, may no longer be part of the team, but the team is still there. So it's not like, something happens over one semester and the team disappears. So it's a long-term commitment. Yeah,
that's why you have quite big groups as well, because if you don't want a situation of small numbers, because then if students decide that for some reason they don't continue, then you're going back to the beginning again. Whereas if you have larger groups, you get this sort of critical mass carried forward. The application process is usually we have an information session where we tell the students about VIP and we invite them to apply. And it's very much along the lines of, what will you bring to it? Why do you want to be involved, and what will you bring to it? So that it isn't necessarily based on the students' grades. We often find that students who are not necessarily the A students academically can really excel when they're on a team and when they're working with other people. It's often quite satisfying that students who are maybe further down the rankings can suddenly produce a fantastic performance and come out of their shell in how they perform within those groups.
Yeah. We have done some studies at Georgia Tech that show that GPA and the performance on interviews is really uncorrelated with the performance on the teams. So we allow the students to decide which team they would like to join, and basically make the decision, as Steve mentioned, on their enthusiasm for the project. And subject to the desired size of the team and the desired disciplinary composition of the team. So students who apply earlier and are very enthusiastic almost always end up on the team. We do tell them when teams have filled up and notify them that they could wait until next semester to try to join the team, or they can pick a different team.
All right, thank you very much. That's very interesting. The next question with the most votes for you was what you see as the greatest challenges in introducing a VIP approach and how you overcame those challenges. So it will be really interesting to hear from you about this as well.
I'm sorry, what was your question again?
Yeah. What do you see as the greatest challenges in introducing a VIP approach, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Well, I would say the biggest challenge is, and this varies wildly from country to country and even university to university within a country, is figuring out how to fit VIP, which requires this long-term integrated experience, into the curriculum with a meaningful number of credits that count towards students' degrees. And so even if you go to our various sites where we you talk about how the credits count for different students, you'll see within the same university, things are different. And we have done a study on that, what type of credit use structure actually encourages the students to participate for the longest amount of time. And they tend to be threshold type ones, which is if you're on a team for a few semesters for just say 5 credits, then those are just free electives. As soon as you take the 6th or 7th or 8th, beyond that, they count as disciplinary electives or for some type of capstone experience, whether it's senior design or senior thesis. It depends on the department. So I think it's the diversity of departmental approaches that's probably the biggest challenge. You just have to talk with them. But I think we have enough examples of how it's done that at different universities that everybody can point to some type of precedent for it. And actually, if you do back up one slide, those are the courses, how the courses are structured at Georgia Tech. We actually have our own campus-wide subject code, VIP. The last digit is the number of credits for that course. And the students can pick from 1, 2, or 3 credits depending on the year. They can take each course more than once. So sophomores, they take VIP 2601 twice. And graduate students, master's students can participate for credit. And typically PhD students, this is part of their research, so they're registered for 0 credits under 6600.
So the most important, so from an organizational point of view, it's finding these pathways through the curriculum, and it's very discipline specific. Some subjects there are lots of choices, there are options. You can always find a space. Others, it's quite rigid, and it's a little bit harder. I always think to look in terms of the learning outcomes. If most degree programs will have some subjects where you learn skills about group work and presentation and working as a team, getting the softer skills. So as long as you can get the same learning outcomes, then why can't you take that VIP module? So that usually requires quite a lot of dialogue and working with colleagues. In terms of getting the program running successfully, getting the leads, the academic staff who are enthused and get excited about running a VIP team, that everything else follows from that. Once you get the team, the undergraduates are always keen to join, and everything else follows from that. But getting those academics, it's also something that has to be done by their choice. It isn't something where you can allocate someone a teaching duty, like you might ask them to teach a particular class, to say, right, you are running VIP next semester. If the academics aren't really enthused about it, then it won't work. It has to be, it requires, a lot of these things require that sort of passion and enthusiasm to want to do something different. Generally, the students love it. They love the idea of being associated with something new. Getting a bit of freedom to work as part of a group and make a bit more of their own decisions rather than, being talked at in lectures for many hours a day. The students usually rise to that challenge and often amaze you in terms of what the kind of things they produce.
Yeah, all right, thank you very much. That's interesting. Yeah, I think we're just gonna continue because there's a few more questions unless Sibyl is able to join us, and we will see and hear her, then we can immediately move on to her presentation. But yeah, Edward, you talked a bit about the application procedure before. I still see the question about whether or not the students do need to meet any requirements. Is that the case, or is it just on an application basis until the spots are filled, basically?
Oh, you mean, do they have to, are there any GPA thresholds or things like that for
joining? Yeah, something like that, yeah.
No, they're not, because we have found that those are not correlated with performance on the team, which I think is really interesting. I think certainly GPA measures something, but it doesn't necessarily measure how creative you are on a team, how well you collaborate with people in your discipline and other disciplines. So VIP captures that, and I think that's why it's such a great environment for the students to develop their professional skills.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I see Sibyl among the speakers now. If you can just speak up, and then once we hear you, we can move on to your part of the presentation. I still do not hear you, unfortunately. It's of course an unexpected factor that we always have to take into account when doing these online webinars and online conferences. Yeah,
Yes, I think, Ruben, we need to try still another way. So, Sibyl, my colleagues are in touch with you in the background. So,
perfect. Thank you, Tia. Yeah, I can only continue to the discussion with Ed and Stephen, I think. In the meantime, so we had another question about what technical platform you use for administering that many students, because we see very large groups and a large number of groups as well. So how do you deal with that administratively?
I think each university has a different solution to that. Our course management system is the way we organize the teams in terms of seeing who's on a particular team, because it's all those courses that we showed you. Each team is one section of every one of those courses. So you combine them under one umbrella on the learning management system. But we have our own approach to have our own peer evaluation software, and it can either be based on Excel spreadsheets, or we have an online system which actually keeps track of things over the years. And the rest is done just within the team itself, led by the academic staff in terms of the grading experience. Now, the grading is done twice a semester. So you give them feedback, constructive feedback in the middle of the semester, and then they receive the actual grade by the end of the semester.
I think it's best if, as far as possible, the VIP program is embedded in the normal processes of the university and not a separate entity, you know, in terms of acquiring credits and returning exam marks and all of that sort of thing. The more it can be embedded within the university system, the easier it is to scale. What Ed told me at the beginning, and I think we've seen this across lots of universities, you can get started with VIP and you can get up to a certain number of teams quite easily, up to about maybe 8 or 9 teams. And where there's exceptions, you can kind of manage that by hand and fix it and pass on information. If you're really serious about scaling up beyond that, then you need to change the system. You need to be much more embedded in the university's processes, because you can't have people ringing you up every time there's an exam board saying, my exam board's tomorrow, I don't have the marks for this class. So yeah, if you plot the growth of teams over time, you get this long plateau before the processes are put in place to move forward.
Okay, and then we go to Dr. Sibi Richard for her presentation. And I hope that she's on the screen visible for you. Sibyl, if you're ready, then go ahead and start speaking.
So anyway, now I'll go back to the beginning. What I would like to argue is that the teaching and learning reforms and the teaching and learning innovation that we've been discussing in these different sessions are seeing right now a particularly opportune moment, a critical moment, but one where I think teaching and learning innovation is actually moving center stage after a longer period where we found research profiling of institutions to be much more highly regarded, highly politically prioritized. There are different factors that I think are currently contributing to having the teaching approaches and learning approaches that we've been talking about for more than a decade, be it student-centered teaching and learning, be it different kinds of competence-based learning and new ways of defining these. All these are moving center stage for, I think, three different reasons. One is that we're all talking about transformation agendas on all fronts, and these needs that the society is facing are pervading all of our political discussions and our perceptions of what higher education has to provide. So the ubiquitous nature of transformation means that we're redefining boundaries on all fronts, which means also that education has to, higher education has to look for new ways of organizing disciplinary and interdisciplinary discourses, both in teaching and in research. And all of these challenge-based both research calls, but also ways of organizing teaching mean that we have to rethink the boundaries of our programs, rethink the boundaries of our organizational structures. From another side, innovation, the discussions about innovation that we've seen, and there's a whole study that EUA did, or that I did for EUA, which has marked this change very clearly. Innovation is being revisited in a much wider way. I would argue that the new emphasis we're seeing in different higher education policy arenas on innovation imply a different notion of innovation. It's no longer just a sense of technological innovation, but one which joins technological with social aspects, and which usually defines innovation as a process that is multi-stakeholder based and challenge-driven, and that again informs the way we deal with teaching and learning innovation, and informs the way projects are being defined within curricular structures. The last factor that I see that is moving teaching and learning innovation center stage is the overall new centrality of the university as an institution. I think because of our knowledge economies and societies and the challenges we're facing, the university is suddenly becoming a central organization as such, at least if it is able to integrate teaching, research, and knowledge exchange. And we've seen very impressive examples in the different sessions, and especially just now presented by Stephen and Ed, as to how that can be organized. So if I now go into these different ingredients of my quadrants of transformation, just quickly pointing now, first of all, to the innovation agenda. I just want to give one example from the publication that I mentioned, that you also have in your handouts, on the role of universities and regional innovation ecosystems, where we found that the needs that have been defined by external stakeholders, be they enterprises or public organizations, usually point to the need for systemic understanding, for what some of you have called holistic understanding, and for having a certain sense of agency among students or graduates, sometimes called game changers, that would be able to take changes into their hands, organize these processes. And that, of course, means that we don't just need the knowledge that we traditionally have conveyed, but we need also all sorts of personal competences, and have to define ways of fostering such competences. I don't want to go into the details of this table that comes from the study. I just want to point out that the teaching reforms that we've seen connected with this innovation agenda usually mean substantial reorganization internally within institutions. So again, pointing to the need for institutional transformation, different ways of including students in the governance processes, different ways of organizing disciplinary versus interdisciplinary modules and also research programs, different ways of integrating projects into both teaching and research as a regular, in a way, structuring device, and supporting startups, not just as a nice to have way of fueling innovation out there in the non-university world, but supporting startups as a way of also emphasizing ownership of students, which again points back to the teaching and learning reforms that we've discussed for decades around student-centered learning and teaching. So coming now to the teaching and learning reforms that we've all been discussing for a while, and what I've said have now moved center stage, I want to just give two brief examples of models that have been proposed that bring together, I think, quite nicely this discussion of both the teaching and learning reforms with what it means for the institutional transformation processes within universities. One example is the entrepreneurship competence framework that has been worked out with a whole line of stakeholders at the European level. I've given the link again in the handouts. I don't want to go into the details of this, but what I think is important is that it links up knowledge with agency. It brings competences together that show how students and graduates are supposed to be able to bring their knowledge into action and experience or be able to organize their experience together with others so as to make a difference in the world. What I think is important for our purposes of institutional transformation is that what this model, as well as the next one I'm going to point to, have in common, and I think quite a few of these different discussions of competences have in common, is that they structure the learning in terms of a progression toward independence, a progression towards autonomy, a progression towards increasing ability to organize one's agency. And that means that all of us as teachers at universities, this is the second example that I've taken from the American value rubrics, all of us have to think not just of our own modules and how we organize student learning, how we make sure that that students assume ownership of their own learning processes, but that we have to also align our own teaching with other people's other modules and other approaches across the whole curriculum in order to be able to let a student progress from a foundation level to what is here in the American value rubrics called a capstone level. That means a lot of internal organization, a lot of coordination, a lot of orientation needs, which means new kinds of support staff, again pointing to a whole set of institutional transformations that go way beyond the innovation of an individual teacher in his or her own teaching process. So I want to point to now the institutional dimension of all of this. I think in our current, what one might call 21st century teaching and learning reforms, what we're seeing, and this has been very nicely put forward by Stephen and Ed earlier, is that all dimensions of higher education are coming together here. We can't just have teaching and learning innovation be dealt with in one part of the institution and research development in another, but we have to think all of these dimensions together in order to really transform the institution. So research competences are very relevant to our everyday teaching and learning. We're seeing that project-based learning, again, means that a lot of actors within universities have to engage in a new quality of partnerships with external stakeholders that go way beyond the usual project work, that have a much more long-term and much more substantial way of informing the way we go about our way of developing programs, both on the research front and on the teaching front. And last not least, the teaching and learning reforms and the way we want to emphasize agency and ownership means that we also have to address governance in new ways and seek ways in which students can co-create and co-design courses much more than we've seen in the past. So my argument then is that we're seeing an overall alignment now of teaching and learning reforms together with an institutional transformation process that reaches beyond that, which should make it easier for some of you out there as innovators in teaching to make your case as one that is central to the institutional transformation, even at research universities that might in the past have not prioritized teaching and learning reforms as highly. Last thing I want to point to is two examples that I think, or one could go into three, but I don't think I have time. Just one or two examples that I think illustrate this overall institutional catalyst function of teaching and learning innovation. One, the lower one there called Stellify is an example from the University of Manchester, where all students are in a way sort of empowered over the course of their whole curriculum of both coming forward with their own agenda of what they want to develop in terms of personal competences, and then being supported by the institution that is helping them look for projects in the community, either within the university or in the city or elsewhere, to come forward with projects that they themselves would reflect through the course of the project work, but that would help them feel empowered in the competences that they are developing within the framework of the project. And they are also then sort of celebrated in this process by the institution in the framework of this accompaniment. The last not least example that I really love is from Aalto University, is the Design Factory, which is often called by them a passion-based form of learning. And it actually brings together teams, interdisciplinary teams of students, researchers, and external stakeholders, where they co-design in a limited number of months solve a problem and design a prototype for a company or for an organization. And then this is actually moved into reality with the help of the company, and it makes the students both experience interdisciplinary team work over a number of months, but it also makes them engage their own theoretical learning in a professional context. So what I think both of those institutions have shown very nicely is how this change has gone way beyond that individual innovation project and has actually changed the mindset of many of the professors in the institution. Even those who were skeptical in the beginning have moved into these projects. So I think it's a nice way of illustrating the power that some of these innovations can have in terms of institutional cultural change. This is where I want to end here, so as to leave some space for maybe some questions, if that is in any way possible. And sorry again for the mess with the cyberspace welcome zone here earlier.
Right, thank you. Yeah, there's maybe space for just one question. So if anyone has one, then please, you can enter it now in the Q&A section. See, look, yeah. I see a new one, I think. Yeah, it's kind of difficult to select them from between the questions for the previous speakers. But there was still a poll that you had. If possible, we can very quickly go to that one.
Yes, so I was wondering, with respect to this central point of teaching and learning innovation and its link to a change of institutional culture, I was wondering what you think. Do you think that the learning and teaching innovation needed at your institution, according to your own sense of it, would necessarily actually involve a change of institutional culture? Yes or no? Would be interesting to see how many of you see a link of these of the two, to get a sense of how much teaching and learning innovation has moved beyond the individual schemes that you're actually reforming. So I was wondering.
Can we see the results coming in now?
Wow.
We see that there's a very large imbalance.
Okay, well, that's great. I mean, I find this one of the most uplifting results of not just here of this poll, but overall of my sense in recent years of teaching and learning innovation. When I think back of just 10 years ago, how one had to fight within institutions to get attention for teaching and learning innovation beyond the field of the early adopters, to get it prioritized in strategic development in its links to the research profile of an institution. It's great to see how the overall institutional effect of teaching and learning innovation is feelable apparently by our participants as well. So that's another way to regain one's optimism even in these COVID times.
Absolutely, great to see some optimism and some positive feelings for change as well here among the participants of this meeting. Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time now, but thank you really for your presentation, for your insights, for the input from all the participants as well. Thank you as well to Ed and Stephen for the presentation of the VIP program. And then now I think we can go to Tia for a last word.
Yes, very last word. We're running out of time. I do want to thank all the speakers and Ruben for chairing this session that turned out to be rather exciting, from the technical side of it. But I think the Siby's presentation wraps up really nicely today's sessions, because it kind of brought the framework on what all the things we've been discussing in the three sessions today have been dealing with. So it kind of summarized in a way what today has been about. So we are wrapping up today's program, except that if you did sign up for the virtual networking cocktail, the room is open at the moment. You are welcome to step into the Zoom room, and there you will be able to speak and activate your microphone. If you did not sign up for that one and you want to just be in peace as of now, we do hope to see you tomorrow, 9 o'clock Central European time. We will continue with some exciting aspects of our topic. And for instance, for Ruben, I think it will be interesting to know tomorrow we will have a specific session focusing on how to get the students on board in these topics. So thank you and everyone, and have a nice evening if I don't see you at the networking cocktail in 2 seconds.